a CBDC would be terrible. It would be a very bad thing. Like what I would prefer to happen is central banks say, hey, if you're going to be a stable coin in the private sector, we'd like you to follow these things. We would prefer that you're backed one-to-one with real assets. And here's some guidelines for reporting transparency, just kind of like the nutritional label on your soft drinks. Like here's how you report to consumers so they know what they're getting. Is the stable coin actually stable, and what does it represent, and what could they redeem it for if they so choose?
Welcome to another episode of the Alfalfa podcast. I'm a little sad that we're not in person today, but I'm also happy because we have some good shit to discuss.
Nostalgia.
You know,
Kinda
we're
like
back
it.
to remote.
This is how we all began.
Shit. This is just fuzzy grain videos and lag times. Still put out some decent quality content, though. We really did. It was good beginnings. Nick, you're in Paris.
Bonsoir, boys. Bonsoir. Got a
Yeah,
glass
man.
of wine.
So-
Nick's drinking wine.
Yeah.
Is anyone else
Is
drinking? Because
bonsoir good evening.
It sure is. I know it's morning time for you.
All right, my French is
well,
no
it's
bueno.
it's 10:45 in San Diego, but I'm in Wyoming, so I feel like I can drink. It's 11:45 for me.
Oh, it's almost noon for you. Yeah, that's totally acceptable.
Yeah, basically happy hour.
I don't have any Baileys, but if I did, I probably would have put some in my coffee. So we'll see how.
I feel
so
like
it
I
goes.
need a
Caffeine.
drink. I feel like after last week's episode with Armand, I did the complete opposite of everything we talked about. And I was up till 1 a.m. placing leveraged longs, and then shockingly, I didn't sleep well. I actually had this like horrible fever dream where I woke up. But you ever dream where you wake up and it just feels like your room and it's totally normal, but then like you quickly realize it's not your room. It's like a dream and the world isn't real. Like I woke up in my bed and I looked outside the window and it was like I don't know, I was kind of like on a beach and there were ships like coming in, like it was like D-Day, and then like people were like, somebody ran into my room and they're like, we launched a nuke, and I was like, what? And then like soldiers came into my room. It was crazy. It was wild. It was like a nightmare. And then I woke up, but then I wasn't awake again, and I do this like Inception thing sometimes where I keep waking up and I'm not, I'm still like asleep. It was terrible. So anyway, long story short, I did not sleep very well. I had to make coffee twice this morning, as I showed you guys for my picture.
Dude,
where I made
I
coffee without the mug in the machine. So
I've had those Inception dreams. They're gnarly.
Steven,
why don't you?
you're
on a roll. Why don't you kick it off with your alpha?
You got rid of your.
Why don't you kick it off with your
cash now.
alfalfa, Steven?
Shouldn't this be a calm moment in your life? Why D-Day invasions?
well, I'm clearly.
Can I
an
say
addict.
before Steven, you get going? Can I say that I've woken up every day this morning thinking that I'm like, oh fuck, I'm about to get married. Like I think it's my wedding day every morning, and I'm all panicked.
So yeah, alfalfa round. I was talking about this a little bit in the Discord yesterday, but I placed a nice juicy short on Atom, which I ended up closing out most of it this morning because the market was looking kind of pumpy to me. But I don't know, just kind of gave me the ETH vibes. You know, you had this very steady staircase up, price accumulation increase going into their release, and then the release happened, and then it's like, oh wait a minute, we're in a bear market with the sell the news event and kind of like staircase up, elevators down type thing. So that was a nice little trade. I think I'm still looking to probably re-enter it at some point if I want to go short the market again. It just looks like it has a lot of ways to fall. You know, I think we're at the stage of the market now where you short some of these coins that have just been killed so much that they can kind of like rip your face off in some nasty rallies. And it's sort of like ETH post merge. You know, that was actually like a really good short relative to some of these other crappier altcoins that have just been absolutely murdered to death already. You know, kind of bigger they are, harder they fall type thing. So that's what I did. That's what I got my eye on.
Awesome. Eric, you want to go?
Yeah, I was doing the same thing. Basically, like my whole like longer term thesis has always been around like going long ETH and then hedging out ETH beta. So I've been like short shit stonks, shit coins, and over this weekend I went short Algo, Stellar, Ripple. These were all like up 30% over the last 7 days, and um, I did close them just because it just seems like um, the short side has been largely priced in for me. I mean, I am fully aware that we're in a bear market, so like everything probably will go lower at some point, but I just don't want to like try to squeeze all the juice out of the orange right now. So I closed the shorts, but scalped it over the
Yeah,
weekend. It
you
was
and I
nice.
were talking about this a little bit in the Discord briefly, but I think we're kind of like wondering the same thing now. Like if we're at that stage of the market where we should be like accumulating spot, for the long term, not jumping all in, but nibbling here or there. And yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to take any sort of long macro short views anymore. I still might, but it does seem like a good spot to just sit on a lot of cash, buy some spot, and then like hedge out with some of these like alts when they pump, just like kind of sniping little shorts here and there to just stack a little more cash and then buy more ETH ultimately. I think I like that.
That's been my entire strategy. Like every profit that I realize just goes right into ETH spot. And like I think the hard part for me is going to be not selling the ETH spot if we like zoom up to 1500.
Yeah.
Like I think just holding on to that is going to be my challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in cash for this whole time, at least last let's see, since July-ish, and it's felt good to be mostly cash, and I think it's going to continue to feel good over the next year. As far as like things that happened last week, I ended up closing like 70 to 75% of the puts. They were printing green last week, and felt like it was time for a little mean reversion possibly. We hit like some like lower ranges there, and I just thought, okay, I'm going to take some of the profits that I made from those puts. I might look to put them back on at some point. We'll see. And then I had a few ETH buys, actually, some limit orders trigger. I had two orders at 1260. I think one earlier today, I believe, and then one last week. So it all still amounts to a small amount, like roughly in total 5% of the cash that I hope to deploy into ETH over a long period of time. But I do think fundamentally we're going into a worse economy, and I think we're still in this liquidity down cycle. It's just not going to be a straight line. Just how we talked about in previous episodes, how inflation decreasing is not going to be a straight line. I don't think this asset prices are definitely going to be in a straight line down, even though things are going to get a little worse. We could have a year before we're really in a hard recession where everyone agrees upon it, and so in that time you could see some really strong pumps. So I'm just going to try to be patient here, and but anyway, those are the two moves: closing out most of the puts and a few limit orders triggered. So we'll see what happens this week.
Well done. Well done.
Well done. My alfalfa is related to episode 62, the dopamine addiction chronically online episode. So after we recorded, I learned from Sly that iOS 16 had just come out, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't even hear about that. And I think that night or the next day, I basically did a deep dive on it. I was like, oh, wow, there's some really cool updates here. So I started getting really excited. And a few days ago, I installed it, and I took like 2 hours to go through every single new setting, extractor. That's just how I roll. And fully customized my life and the experience I would like to have on my phone, depending on the time of day, depending on the location I'm at, depending on the activities I'm currently in. And I even automated a lot of these things because you can, based on, again, location or activity or an app you open or whatever you do. I am blown away by iOS 16. Not just the basic things that I've been waiting 10 to 15 years for, like the ability to mark a fucking text message, an iMessage unread, which is just such a basic human right, in my opinion, as I tweeted. Um,
Inalienable.
an inalienable human right that they have just fucking sandbagged us on for so many years just to be able to come out in 2022 and say, here's Mark unread. It's like, oh, you assholes. But they finally did it. So I'm actually grateful. Thank you, Apple, for bringing us into the new century. And the ability to unsend a message, the ability to edit a message, those are just like awesome. But the actual focus time, the focus screens and the focus types are incredible. Like, they actually work really, really, really well. I am not opening certain apps and I feel much more focused and grounded. And it's funny because on previous versions of the OS, of iOS, whatever, 15, 14, they integrated this feature, but it wasn't effective other than just simply going in do not disturb mode. These actual focus screens, if you go through the settings and really fully customize the experience you want to have, it's awesome. I'm really happy about it, to the point where it actually kind of takes away the need for the second phone, because yeah, it just changes the experience. I fully believe, like, again, we talked about, if you get rid of the drug, if you remove the distraction from your environment, then you are and you extract yourself from that situation, you're more likely to become conscious of the behavior and the way that you're acting when something is in front of you. And it's really helping me become aware of that. So yeah, huge fan of this.
Share your settings in the Discord. I think we all want to
Yeah,
see.
I could. They're just so personal to shit that matters to me, but I'd totally be happy to. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Share the alpha.
So, Eric, kick us off, man.
Okay, so on our money episode today, I asked you guys to watch
Short video.
a symposium hosted by the Bank of France talking about the tokenization of finance. And man, this was illuminating to me. It was 4 hours long, so thank you guys for
We
in
watched
very
this so you guys don't
short
have to.
notice. Yeah, and it happened yesterday, so there's not like a lot of opinion pieces that we could lean on. We had to go straight to the source material. But in this symposium, I heard about it, that it was going to happen last weekend, and I thought, oh shit, here we go. They're going to completely dismantle the crypto as we know it, and it turned out to be somewhat of the opposite. So I just want to read one quote before I kick it over to you guys. But here's a quote that says, crypto and digital assets have a role to play alongside traditional finance. Some of them are working and some are not going to work. The current normalization phase in monetary policy should expose which are promising and which are purely speculative. And that was from the central bank in Singapore. But I think it illuminates the fact that these central bankers are more open to crypto than we had previously thought. And I wanted to just like set that as the framework, but then kick it over to you guys to see what your opinion is of the entire thing.
I mean,
Nick, you want to go?
I'm curious what you guys thought. My first reaction, and maybe just because I'm used to hearing congressmen and senators and a lot of other U.S. Lawmakers talk about crypto, but I was really impressed with just their broad set of knowledge of DeFi and the crypto ecosystem, and like the series of events that we all went through being part of this community. They seemed just as knowledgeable of the series of events, specifically with, they use words like crypto winter, and they were very familiar with Duquan and Terra and Luna very specifically.
Yeah.
But they knew the issues with DeFi and AMMs. They understand lending and collateral, which obviously these are basic financial concepts, which they surely understand in the traditional system. But my first reaction was just I was impressed with their personal knowledge, because these weren't like underlings expertise, who are on a specific committee who have expertise. This was the central bankers, Lagarde, Powell, and a few others speaking themselves. And so I don't know. That was my first impression. I'm curious if you guys thought the same, that their knowledge was better than you expected.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That was the first thing that struck me, right? Was, oh, they actually know what they're talking about. They actually understand this. I don't know if any of them said anything that I really disagreed with, to be honest. I thought all of their assessments of the sort of perils of DeFi were completely accurate, and they used pretty good examples of why this happened. What I would add to this as well is that they really had a good understanding and appreciation for smart contracts, both like the potential for like enhancing the existing financial system with them, but also there was some good discussion about like the drawbacks to them. The irreversibility of transactions, the potential of hackers exploiting stuff, and systemic risks to the system. I think these are all um, super valid, and yeah, yeah, we sometimes get this like cartoonish picture of central bankers and government officials on crypto Twitter as these just complete idiots in suits who are just like anointed to drive the financial bus off the cliff and make us all poor. And yeah, they're clearly smart people with just different motivations and interests that we have. So it was pretty humanizing in a way to see them like that, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree, and it kind of made me think. And Stephen, you mentioned that they just had different interests than we do as a consumer of these technologies, and obviously for those listening that haven't watched this video, they were. I guess as you'd expect, very pro regulation. It was through and throughout all of them speaking, and kind of a through line through it that it needs regulation, and it needs regulation as it ties into the traditional finance system. And I kind of thought, you know, I don't disagree with a lot of the weaknesses and threats, but I was wondering what you guys thought about this question is, do you guys think that DeFi could grow to the TVL and DeFi to a trillion to 10 trillion without regulation? Like if we just went on as we've been going on with these booms and busts and hacks, but also crazy innovation, like will we eventually get there, or do we need regulation? Like, are they right? Like, are they essentially giving us the path towards hey, here's the path. If you want your asset class to become worth 10 trillion, you need to put these regulatory rails on, and it will help you. I think we obviously all have concerns with that, but I'm just curious if you think it's possible to grow that big without some regulatory oversight.
That's a great question. I don't have an answer. Keep going.
So, well, I guess like the way that I interpreted the entirety of the thing was not necessarily DeFi focused. It was like, these are central bankers, so they're central bankers are concerned with money. Like M1, M2, and what they're really concerned about. This is like straight from Jay Powell's mouth. He's like, well, as of now, stable coins have only existed in like settling transactions within crypto payments. But he's like concerned when and if stablecoins move beyond crypto payments to more mainstream, to like retail purchases. And he's like, well, when we get to that point, we want to make sure that stable coins are more money like, not like these algo coins that can go to zero or whatever. He's like, stable coins have traditionally, I guess, been pegged to the dollar. So the dollar is actually issued by us. So they're actually borrowing on the security and the validity of our money. And he's like, he was more talking about like stable coins than DeFi. I guess like DeFi obviously includes stable coins. I think like if stable coins do get anointed like via CBDC, which they talked a lot about, then I think like DeFi could become absolutely huge. And like beyond DeFi, we could go into actual payments using stable coins.
Yeah,
Is
I mean,
there an example of of a financial system that was unregulated in the past? Anything analogous to this situation that really scaled tremendously at that level? Maybe not 10 trillion, but historically sort of had that level of exponential growth and upswing that was not complete, that was completely decentralized and unregulated? Or
not, I don't think necessarily the way you're describing it, but Jay Powell mentioned, he's like, our public money, meaning like Fed issued money, has always existed alongside private money, which is like commercial bank money that, and commercial banks have been innovating. So they've been like proponents of innovation. They said like, we used to use cash, then we use checks, then we use credit cards. These were all like private innovations. So we're not against innovation. He's like open to digital currencies. So I thought that was illuminating.
It seems like in a way like we are kind of going back to like the 1800s in a way again, because there was a period of time where we had all of these different forms of money. You had state money, there were some private forms of money. I think there was like some federal money, and there was like all this overlap of all this money people were using in the system that was sort of like quote unquote decentralized, because there was nothing really prohibiting all of that different kinds of money to existing. But like the system didn't seem to scale and get efficient until it kind of came under that federal umbrella, and there was some regulatory
Right.
certainty and some of the benefits that go along with it. Like to answer your question, Nick, like I think we can get to 1 trillion just being the Wild West, but I don't know if we can get to 10 trillion, 20 trillion, 30 trillion. It just doesn't seem reasonable to me. One thing they said that really stood out to me was they made a lot of points of talking about what people need in the money and why people like government money. And they talked about how they like the idea that there's this like certainty and safety and the ability to sort of like make mistakes and not lose everything that you have and everything. And I think those are really great points. And it's like when you reflect on how people actually use DeFi, like that most of the money is in USDC, right? It's not in DAI. It's not in some weird algo stables. Like it's been an observation of mine that people treat, and they made this differentiation too between like crypto, between like currencies and speculative assets. And people, like, I behave differently with my money versus my speculative assets. Like I do try to keep most of my I had a period where I took money out of Circle because I was a little concerned with it, but like I'm back in USDC now. Like I want that safety and certainty with my cash, even if I am YOLOing into speculative assets with the rest of my money. There is a bit of like a bifurcation there, and they were definitely talking about this.
So I think it's a good point. So they did mention specifically, they said with the speculative stuff, I don't think they're as likely to regulate that. They're like, Bitcoin and ETH aren't money in terms of like medium of exchange because of the volatility. We've talked about this on previous episodes. Like they're more interested in regulating the medium of exchange, which they view as like digital dollars. So like Christine Lagarde, president of the ECB, was saying that they're already in process of developing their own digital euro, their digital euro stablecoin. Jay Powell was on the other hand saying like we're not going to pursue that. That would take that would necessitate approvals from Congress, the executive branch. Like we're monitoring, but like I think what Jay Powell's looking at is like anointing a private version like USDC, so long as it's backed by real money, which USDC is, and he wants more transparency.
And why
around
is that? Why not have a central bank version that they get behind? Why is it that he wants to get behind a private one more so?
Well, Jay Powell was just saying that like it just takes the moving parts take too long. Like he's going to require Congress to approve it and the president to approve it, and
years of
for
research
them,
after that.
it's like it's not worth the.
Kind of
It
feels
just
like a
sounds
more
like we're
American thing to do, right? Like we like kind of outsource it
Yeah,
to
it
the
was
private,
funny.
and the Europeans try to do it under the government umbrella. It kind of makes sense.
Well, I thought it
guess.
was the opposite. Like the interviewer was saying the opposite. He was like, "Well, usually the U.S. is innovating
Right.
this stuff, and Europe is regulating it." And this was like kind of reversal.
Oh, that was like Lagarde. Yeah, I remember Lagarde. She was like, "Well, I'm actually going to talk mostly about the innovation side, and then Jerome's going to talk about how we want to regulate the shit out of this." Well, she didn't say that, but yeah, it was a bit of a role reversal there. But then when it ultimately came to producing it, like it seemed like the U.S. had much more of an interest in sort of anointing and outsourcing it to properly regulated private entities, whereas Europe seemed to be like very interested in under the process of kind of doing it under a government kind of central bank umbrella. And I didn't. That's another thing that struck me about this talk is I didn't realize how far along they they were in actually carrying out some of this stuff. One thing that particularly struck me, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this, Eric, is that it sounded like France had basically like issued tokenized bonds on Ethereum already, which I was like, holy cow, seems like a big reveal, right?
Oh my gosh! If you made it that far, that was like 3 hours plus into
I
the
take this
the
job
video.
very
If you made it that
seriously.
far, yeah, it was the European Investment Bank partnered with the ECB to test out their digital euro, and they issued $100 million bond, which for them was like it was just like a little trial run, and they issued that bond on the Ethereum blockchain. And this guy who was talking about it, he was like a fixed income expert, and his his quote is so awesome. It's very bullish ETH, I think, but he goes, we saw significant advantages for issuers and investors. First, there was transparency. There's more fluidity, speed of settlement. We have a reduction of intermediaries and fixed costs. And he goes further to say, I have no doubt this would benefit the fixed income market. And he goes, I would not dare to comment on other markets, but I do think there's a high probability that the possible advantages also translate to other market segments.
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea of tokenized securities is one that they accepted more than I thought they would. I'm talking about the central bankers, but also this investment bank, Societe Generale. They're a large bank here, and I think for that, it's easy for them to understand. Here's this token that represents some form of ownership that's expressed in a digital, you know, currency, and it kind of fits well within all of their blocks. So I thought that was really cool that he acknowledged that not having as many intermediaries and speed to issuing the bond. Now I did think they kind of issued the bond and then kind of like bought it themselves in a different part of their bank and kind of kept it, you know, pretty internal, kind of like a test, but still impressive that they did it, and certainly bullish for bringing assets and other securities on chain. And I think that's bullish for ETH. Sounds like it is. Feels like it is. Glad I own it.
Well, okay, so on that front, I think there is a bullish case for ETH because I think the way this all plays out, what I didn't realize is there's 100 different central banks that are pursuing CBDCs today, over 100, and I'm blown away by that. And the euro is looking to launch by like 2025, their stable coin. So they're already moving. And what I read in like a different article released by the ECB, they said that it's not necessarily going to be on ETH. They're like pursuing three different strategies. One is to have like a distributed ledger technology platform connect with like the existing central bank infrastructures. So that'd be like number one, like having a blockchain that like communicates with their target services or like fast or whatever. The second one would be to create their own blockchain. And then the third one would be to make their central bank digital currency available on many different blockchains. So depending on what path they pursue, it could be bullish or whatever.
I mean, none of you guys have brought this up yet. I'm curious what you think. In my mind, a CBDC would be terrible. It would be a very bad thing. Like what I would prefer to happen is central banks say, hey, if you're going to be a stable coin in the private sector, we'd like you to follow these things. We would prefer that you're backed one-to-one with real assets. And here's some guidelines for reporting transparency, just kind of like the nutritional label on your soft drinks. Like here's how you report to consumers so they know what they're getting. Is the stable coin actually stable, and what does it represent, and what could they redeem it for if they so choose? The CBDCs could be an authoritarian's like best, tool in their toolkit. It's very ripe for
sure.
exploitation. And I think we've talked in the past how centralized authorities, once they get an authority, once they have power, they do not relinquish that power in the future. That power is part of their identity. It's part of, their survival, and they will protect that power over time. And I think we forget that. But I'm curious, are we all in agreement that that is a big threat and that is a bigger downside? And or is anyone here of the
Well, I have
opposite mind that this is bullish if there's a CBDC that we have to use?
that's a good question. I have something that maybe it's like a precursor to that,
Sure.
and then Stephen, if it looks from your hand wave like you do disagree. So, what I wonder is, first of all, I think that the U.S. I'm actually very surprised. I've been very surprised all along that the United States has not been at the forefront and pioneering all of this. I would have thought that a CBDC would have been right up their alley, and leading that initiative for the world would obviously be priority number one, knowing that whoever likely wins this battle is going to be in control of money flows worldwide, internationally. It's just a very important sort of play on the future. What I wonder is, did the United States sit back and say, no, we're kind of, Eric and I talked about this, like, we like this status quo. Things are working just fine. We're still in charge. We're at the top of the hill. There's no concerns here. If other countries want to go and explore and innovate, that's fine. Let's see what they do, how it goes. We're a little apprehensive about this digital blockchain cryptocurrency space as a whole. Let's see what happens. And I think that what happened is that all of a sudden, other countries are moving much, much faster. And in order to actually play catch up, the United States has no choice but to back privatized versions of stablecoins rather than develop their own, because they actually realize now, in hindsight, how important what I just said is. And if they don't innovate and get to the top and get to the forefront, they will be left behind, and other countries could circumvent. So I actually think it's like a blessing, the way this has played out, that if everything you guys are saying, first of all, I only got like 45 minutes into this 4 hour assignment, but if everything you guys are saying is correct, like, and we back USDC, for example, I think that is a blessing. And I agree with you, Nick, that that is what I want. I would like to see regulation of privatized stable coins. Here's the recipe. Here's what you need to do. Here's the transparency we all need as consumers and innovators on the technology side. If we're going to go and create something like that, how do we do it? What's the right way? I'm very much against CBDCs, not because of what they might be today, but because of what they might be tomorrow. It's super, yeah, we've got to be very careful about that. But it sounds like you don't feel that way, Steven?
I mean, I do and I don't. I think there's some nuance here. I don't think CBDCs are inherently bad. What makes them bad is being forced to use them. Um, I'm sort of optimistic, and I think the direction we're going in, based on what I heard here, is that we're going to sort of be allowed to run a bunch of different stablecoin experiments. Like what the US is doing, I think you're partially right that it was done sort of via incompetence. Uh, but on the other hand, we typically don't really do a good job of centrally planning stuff anyway, to the extent like a country like Singapore does, right? So it would be a very American thing to do, to sort of decentralize the centralized stablecoin in a way. But it's sort of like, I want to launch 900 fast food franchises across the country. It's like, well, what's faster, me just building 900 of those, or me being like, here are the rules, this is the blessing, you get to use this amazing dollar brand, now go forth and run your experiments. I think it actually gets us to a much better product, a lot faster. And it does sound like they're all aware of the need for these coins and everything to interact in a way that makes sense. They're aware of the kind of constraints of working in a decentralized ecosystem, where if you don't have rules or things that coordinate particularly well, all the capital can flow like very, very rapidly somewhere else. They're aware that they don't have that control, which is which is great. Um, I I guess like I think what's important here is the choice element, right? And I think that the
Hmm.
government's best chance of regulation, right, isn't to use like the stick, right, and say you can't use any of this stuff or you go to jail. It's to use like the carrot. It's to build products that people want to use. And again, like I was saying earlier, we already see that people do want to use USDC. They like the centralized element of it. Like I personally would love it if I had tokenized T-bills that I could use in DeFi with collateral. And if something happened to me, like I could go to the courts or something and maybe get bad transactions reversed or like have some claim to the property like I have in real life. Like I want that. I want the ability to go cry for help with some of my money and to have certainty. But I also want the ability to use some of my money in the Wild West in this area where I am comfortable sort of giving up control. And I think for too long it's been like kind of like the Bitcoin vision where it's like, no, everything has to be completely decentralized, completely free from everything. It's the Wild West. We're building a new money system. And I just don't see that as our future. I think we are going to build a money system where we have these centralized and decentralized elements kind of working together, hopefully in harmony, and people are just going to be free to choose like the systems that they do and want you that they want to use. And that's sort of my vision of the future crypto utopia. I hope, and I don't know if you guys disagree with that.
I agree with that.
I'm equally optimistic with Steven. And I think to Nick's point, the risk and the opportunity are two sides of the same coin.
Hmm.
Like when you have a stable coin, it's like what it allows is programmability, and the programmability can be used to restrict or it can be used to enhance. Like we talked about it. I think maybe Nick even talked about it on one of our previous episodes. How like when we issued the COVID stimmies, like it would be nice if you could program that money to be like, hey, well, you have to spend this on X, Y, and Z that like moves money back into the economy, and that's actually pretty solid. Rather than just putting in a Dogecoin and GameStop.
Yeah, that's where I think the price of these benefits that we're talking about is too expensive for me. Like I think what Steven's talking about is he would like tokenized assets and be able to use them in DeFi, and then he would like to go to the court and uphold some basic fraud or ownership right laws in the court of law. And I think that can still happen without a CBDC. And when you talk about programmable money, that to me scares me because yes, in the most perfect world, that would be like a benign use of the technology. But during that same time, during those stimmies, they were also trying to get us to stop buying masks and stop buying toilet paper because, well, everyone else
Yep.
needs some too. And so, what if they weren't allowing you to buy a mask or to buy toilet paper because, well, they wanted to ration certain materials that we had in our country? And so it becomes this slippery slope of like, well, that's the current thing of that time. What's the next current thing? Is it going to be
Yeah.
that like, yeah, I mean, we can go on this for an endless amount of time. I mean, you can kind of see where this flows. And so that's where it becomes too much of a slippery slope for me. I also do think that, or I hope that in some future versions of protocols on Ethereum, some form of privacy, just privacy in transactions, will be available. And I'm not talking about like full transparency. I just want it similar to how I use my cash. The government doesn't track the cash I have in my left pocket, and if I hand Steven, Armand, or Eric some, they don't track that. I want that same right for crypto. I don't know if it's possible, but I sure do know that if CBDCs take over, that will most definitely not be possible.
Well, I don't know if it makes you feel any better, but Christine Lagarde and Jay Powell both said that a pillar of their CBDC development would be on privacy of transaction, not full privacy, but like there would have to be proof of identity, uh, but not like full transparency on every
I laughed.
transaction
I laughed
level.
at
And
those.
and
I heard them say that, and I was like,
that's what they
"Get the fuck
said.
out of here!"
That's what they
Like,
said.
It's quite the tightrope they're walking.
yeah, I mean,
At
It
least
was
they
nice
said
that
it.
they seemed like they cared, though.
yeah.
It seemed like they cared.
I'm
I think one last thing that I want to say about it, if you made it to 4 hours in, one of the guys from the European branch, he goes like, we're so concerned about the environmental factor, and this is like going back towards ETH. He's like, we're so concerned about the environmental factor, we don't like you know, protocols that just like burn through energy. With proof of stake, we think we can improve upon it and go to our own new method called like proof of energy. And in my mind, I was like, you're not going to be able to do that. So I think they're gonna lean on the lesser of two evils, which is proof of stake. Was my like opinion on
There
that.
was
Yeah, I
another
liked the
thing.
option 3 you laid out. Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say there's one other thing I wanted to bring up. I think it was the central banker from Singapore. He brought up a really good point. He's like, we do need regulation. We do need laws for this part of the economy. But he was also like, well, these are algorithms and they're global. So how do we do that? I think he clearly brought forward, the benefits of when smart contracts are on a decentralized platform. And I've never called myself a decentralization maxi, but I could certainly get behind being one if we're talking about some regulation that would squash growth or prevent us from having the same basic freedoms we have with like physical cash. If decentralization prevents that, then I'm for it. So I think they all kind of caveated how are we going to actually what dominion are we going to like rule over when these algorithms are global. So I think they all had like at least a sentence or two about that, so that's yet to be figured out. And they mentioned it requires vast amount of cooperation to do that. And like,
Right, which
yeah,
has
exactly, I
never
was like, well,
existed.
I can count
Right.
on you for exactly not being able to cooperate to get on the same page about this, I think.
Well, I wrote down this quote from JPOW about regulation, and I thought it was poignant because like at least they're not overreaching. He goes like this: in principle, we want the same risks to have the same regulation, but with genuinely novel activities, such as like replacing intermediaries with smart contracts, decentralized governance, unhosted wallets that allow users to self custody their crypto assets. These novel uses represent new risks, and we have to regulate those in new ways. And we have a lot of work to determine what is appropriate there and what's acceptable. And I think that's like an amazing approach already. I was always under the impression that they were just like ban everything.
I wanted to mention one quick thing about privacy and add to what you said, Nick. So I think that's another one of those that's a tough word, inalienable rights, the cash example. And I think it's worth fighting for. There's actually someone in our community. Have you guys heard of Mobile Coin?
Mm-mm.
So Mobile Coin is integrated inside of Signal Messenger, which is famous for sort of being, and particularly, during COVID and when a lot of things went down, famous for being the most encrypted private messaging app. And inside of Signal, you can perform transactions. You can send money privately with Mobile Coin. I haven't done a deep dive on Mobile Coin, but their little shtick is that it's basically cryptocurrency used as digital cash, mobile only on your phone, and all the information about the transaction is private: sender, receiver, amount transferred, and all the messages are unknown to Signal or anyone for that matter. So I feel like as long as things like this can continue to be possible and thrive, we could be in a great position. And yeah, I really liked option number 3 you said there earlier, Eric, because I think that allows for the most flexibility going into the future, because betting on one blockchain seems a little risky to me when we're talking about long term.
Option number 3 was issuing CBDCs on many blockchains and having them be centrally originated from a central bank, but then having them be allowed to be used on other
That
blockchains. And
just
I agree
makes
with
so
you.
much sense. Maximize the level of innovation, rely on private companies to make your entire new ecosystem possible. Like, why not?
That's such a weird thing to have, though. Like for a consumer to have a direct relationship with a central bank. Like I don't know if things were designed for that direct relationship. It was designed to have
Mm,
intermediaries, like commercial entities who their customer is the consumer, and they have a profit motive. But central banks don't have that, and I do think there are still like unthought of risks of consumers having a direct relationship with their central bank. And I like the idea of, um, you know, uh, several stable coins, commercial private stable coins on several different blockchains versus a CBDC. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know, Stephen. You'd mentioned Bitcoin in the previously. Is there? And I'm sure there's some Bitcoin maxis like screaming at this because they see this as like opportunity, and also probably don't like a lot of what they may be hearing from this talk. Anything to add there, or maybe close with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I was just sitting there and I was just struggling to see how Bitcoin fits into any of this, right? And it just seems like you either have to choose a version of the world where Bitcoin just becomes money and the whole world uses that, or this much more, in my opinion, plausible scenario where we have multiple coins, multiple apps using multiple different blockchains potentially, and basically like this kind of open market of competition. To your like CBD point, for example, Nick, like I think that like as long as you're not China and you close down the internet, like once you open this sort of Pandora's box, it's just going to be too easy for different types of money to compete. And like I question if that's what actually we need all along. Like I question if the problem was like that we needed an entirely new digital money, or we just needed to create technology that enabled competition and checks and balances, and that maybe the stuff we use actually isn't so bad after all. But it's just like everything else in the market, where when you have monopolies, the consumer gets like really bad experiences sometimes, or you have unfair markets, really, I guess is the better thing. The consumer has like a bad experience. So like, yeah, that was one of the bigger things that struck me, just like this sort of like choice between the two worlds we're going into. And I don't know, maybe some Bitcoiner can tell me how Bitcoin can play nicely with this world, but like I get it's harder and harder for me to see it every day.
Yeah, I would love for someone to hop in the Discord and provide us, how Bitcoin integrates, because I think I'm with you now, and I've kind of refined my bull case for Bitcoin thesis a little bit. Like I don't see it playing a role in medium of exchange. It's clearly a crypto asset. It could be used as collateral potentially, but certainly not on Bitcoin's own rails. And I think you
mm,
mentioned this in our episode with David on Bankless and Layer Zero, but like I kind of view Bitcoin as just another kind of liquidity battery that when the liquidity cycle's on an upturn, it's a great place to be. It's a good investment. But there's one little difference now. I now view it as like a player versus player scenario. Well, on Ethereum or with Ether, I don't think of it as player versus player. I think of it as like there's this ecosystem, this network, and it's growing. There's a lot of new people using the network. There's a lot of new developers, a lot of apps being developed. There's a lot of opportunity. It doesn't feel player versus player when I'm investing in it. I'm investing in this network that is growing, but there's nothing really being built on Bitcoin. There's no, other than users being part of the network, there's not really this a bunch of different nodes being added to the network. And so I just feel like I'm playing against the other holders of this system, and it's all about playing against them as liquidity cycles go up and down.
Hey man, there's like $90 million on Lightning Network now. There's a couple dexes on Phantom that don't have that much TVL. So
Oh,
all right,
should we get
well,
a
I guess we could wrap it there, unless anybody has any other strong comments they'd like to come out with.
No, I mean, I think there's probably some listeners that have some strong comments, and so get in the Discord. We're in there every day, every week, talking about episodes as they come out, but also as things come up in the news, and
yeah,
and any questions people have. A lot of smart people in there. Certainly, people smarter than
a
us in
lot.
there. So hop in.
Yeah, come
Yeah,
direct your Bitcoin hate at me.
Stephen and I have an addiction we're working on actually. So, um, Also wrap with a little teaser for all you money whores that always listen to our money episodes. So in the next episode of Politics, we're going to be talking about Iran. And I think this is a topic that many people are apprehensive about hitting because it's just such a complex topic. And I think we're in a position where we have some unique insights on this. And I think it's going to be a fantastic conversation. So we haven't even done it yet, but I'm sure it'll be interesting. So make sure you hit that episode if you don't normally listen to our politics segments, and we'll see you there. Peace, guys.
Bye.
Later.